I think I didn't do anything wrong, just let a little nostalgia take over when my ex kissed my hand at my own wedding. So why did my husband have to make it a big deal and serve me divorce papers in front of everyone? Now everyone acts like I'm the villain, but I was just being friendly, wasn't I? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the polished floor of the Grandview reception hall as I adjusted my wedding dress one final time. Everything was perfect. The white roses, the champagne fountain, the string quartet playing softly in the corner. I was Morwenna Greaves now, no longer just Morwenna Marsh, and I felt like royalty. "You look absolutely radiant," my mother June whispered, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from my silk gown. "Ethan's such a lucky man." I smiled, basking in the attention. Guests mingled around us, their laughter mixing with the gentle music. My 7-year-old daughter Sophie twirled nearby in her flower girl dress, her blonde curls bouncing with each spin. This was my moment, my day, and I deserved every second of it. "Morwenna." The familiar voice made me turn, and my breath caught slightly. Leo March stood behind me, looking devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit. My ex-boyfriend from college, the one who got away, or rather, the one I'd let go when I got pregnant with Sophie. "Leo," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "I'm so glad you could make it." His green eyes sparkled with that old mischief I remembered so well. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. You look incredible." From across the room, I caught sight of Ethan watching us. My new husband's face was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. His mother Lillian stood beside him, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. She'd never liked me much, always thinking her precious accountant son could do better than a single mother who worked as an office manager. "Thank you," I replied to Leo, letting my hand brush his arm briefly. "It means a lot that you're here." The champagne was flowing freely, and I'd already had 3 glasses. The bubbles made everything feel lighter, more carefree. When Leo offered to get me another drink, I didn't refuse. "So," he said, returning with 2 flutes, "married life treating you well so far?" "All 3 hours of it," I laughed, perhaps a bit too loudly. "It's wonderful. Ethan's a good man." "But?" Leo raised an eyebrow, that knowing smile playing at his lips. "No buts," I said quickly, then took a long sip of champagne. "Well, maybe he's a little predictable sometimes. Safe." "Safe can be boring," Leo murmured, moving closer. "Remember when we used to sneak out to the lake? You were never interested in safe then." The memories flooded back, late nights, stolen kisses, the thrill of young love. Before responsibility, before Sophie, before I had to grow up and make practical choices. "That was a long time ago," I said, but I didn't step away. Across the room, Ethan's brother Oliver was trying to engage him in conversation, but Ethan's attention kept drifting back to us. My sister Kira noticed too, shooting me a warning look that I chose to ignore. "Not that long," Leo said softly. "Some things never change." The band struck up a slow song, and couples began moving toward the dance floor. Ethan started walking over, clearly intending to claim his bride for a dance, but Leo was faster. "One dance with the bride?" he asked, extending his hand. "For old time's sake?" I should have said no. I should have waited for my husband, should have respected the boundaries of my new marriage. But the champagne was singing in my veins, and Leo's smile was so familiar, so warm. "Just one," I said, taking his hand. We moved on to the dance floor, and Leo pulled me closer than was appropriate for a newly married woman dancing with her ex. His cologne was the same one he'd worn in college, woody and masculine. It brought back a flood of memories I'd tried to bury. "You made the right choice," he whispered in my ear. "Ethan's stable, reliable, good father material." "Yes," I agreed, but something in my voice suggested I wasn't entirely convinced. But if you ever get tired of predictable, his hand tightened on my waist. You know where to find me. I should have pulled away, should have reminded him that I was married, that this conversation was inappropriate. Instead, I found myself leaning into him slightly. "Leo," I whispered, not sure if it was a warning or an invitation. The song ended, but we didn't immediately separate. For a moment, we stood there in the middle of the dance floor, lost in our own little bubble. Then reality crashed back as I saw Ethan approaching, his jaw tight with barely controlled emotion. "Mind if I dance with my wife?" Ethan's voice was carefully polite, but I could hear the steel underneath. "Of course," Leo said smoothly, stepping back. But as he did, he lifted my hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles. "Thank you for the dance, Mrs. Greaves." The gesture was intimate, possessive, and completely inappropriate. Gasps rippled through the crowd of watching guests. Someone's phone camera flashed. Sophie, who had been playing nearby, stopped and stared with wide, confused eyes. "What the hell was that?" Ethan demanded in a low voice as Leo walked away. "It was nothing," I said quickly, my cheeks burning. "Just a friendly gesture. You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" Ethan's voice rose slightly before he caught himself, glancing around at our watching guests. "That man just kissed your hand at our wedding reception, Morwenna, in front of everyone." "It was just his way of saying goodbye," I insisted, but even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. "You're being jealous for no reason." Lillian appeared at Ethan's elbow, her face flushed with anger. "That was completely inappropriate, Morwenna. How could you let him—" "Let him what?" I snapped, the champagne making me bold. "Be polite. Show respect. Maybe if everyone wasn't so uptight—" "Uptight?" Lillian's voice was incredulous. "You let another man kiss you at your own wedding." "He kissed my hand, not my lips," I shot back. "God, you people are so old-fashioned." Sophie had started to cry, overwhelmed by the tension and raised voices. My mother June hurried over, scooping up her granddaughter while shooting disapproving looks at Lillian. "Everyone just needs to calm down," June said firmly. "It was a misunderstanding, nothing more. Morwenna would never do anything inappropriate." But I could see the doubt in some faces, the whispered conversation starting around the room. Our perfect wedding was turning into a disaster, and somehow everyone was acting like it was my fault. "We'll discuss this at home," Ethan said quietly, his face pale. "Let's just get through the rest of the reception." But I could see something had shifted in his eyes. The trust, the adoration that had been there during our vows just hours earlier. It was clouded now with suspicion and hurt. As the evening wore on, I tried to salvage the situation, laughing a little too loudly, dancing a little too enthusiastically with anyone who would partner me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something precious had been broken, something that might not be easily repaired. When Leo approached me later to say goodbye, I should have kept it brief and public. Instead, I walked with him toward the exit, away from the crowd. "I'm sorry if I caused trouble," he said, but his smile suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "You didn't," I lied. "Everyone's just being dramatic." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "If you ever need someone to talk to, someone who really understands you, you have my number." Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me standing alone by the exit with my heart racing and my marriage already feeling like it was built on shifting sand. The drive home was silent, except for Sophie's soft sniffles from the back seat. She'd fallen asleep against her car seat, her flower girl dress wrinkled and her face streaked with dried tears. I kept glancing at Ethan, trying to read his expression in the dashboard lights, but his face was stone. Our suburban house looked peaceful in the moonlight, the white picket fence and manicured lawn picture perfect. We'd bought it together 2 years ago, planning for our future as a family. Now, as Ethan carried sleeping Sophie inside, I wondered if that future was already crumbling. "We need to talk," Ethan said quietly, once Sophie was tucked into bed. I followed him to our bedroom, kicking off my heels and trying to project confidence I didn't feel. If this is about Leo— Of course it's about Leo, Ethan interrupted, loosening his tie with sharp, angry movements. What the hell were you thinking, Morwenna? I wasn't thinking anything, I said, unzipping my wedding dress. I was being polite to an old friend. You're making this into something it's not. An old friend? Ethan's voice was incredulous. That man was your boyfriend for 3 years. You lived with him. And tonight, at our wedding, you let him kiss you in front of everyone we know. He kissed my hand, I protested, stepping out of the dress and hanging it carefully in the closet. It's not like we made out on the dance floor. Do you hear yourself? Ethan sat heavily on the edge of the bed. You're acting like this is no big deal, but everyone saw it, Morwenna. My mother, my brother, Sophie. Oh, so this is about what other people think. I turned to face him, hands on my hips. You're more worried about your precious reputation than about us. No, I'm worried about my marriage to a woman who apparently has no boundaries with her ex-boyfriend. Ethan shot back. Do you have any idea how humiliated I felt, standing there watching my wife of 3 hours flirt with another man? I wasn't flirting. The lie came easily, even though I knew it wasn't entirely true. And I'm sorry you felt embarrassed, but that's your insecurity talking, not reality. Ethan stared at me for a long moment, and I could see something shifting in his expression. My insecurity? Morwenna, the man kissed your hand and told you to call him if you ever got tired of predictable. Yes, I heard that part too. My stomach dropped. I hadn't realized Ethan was close enough to overhear. He was just joking around. Was he? Because from where I stood, it looked like he was making a play for my wife, and it looked like you were enjoying it. That's ridiculous, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. You're reading way too much into this. A soft knock interrupted us. Oliver poked his head in, his face apologetic. Sorry to interrupt, but Mum's pretty upset. She's in the kitchen with Sophie, who woke up asking why everyone was fighting. I felt a stab of guilt. In all of this drama, I'd forgotten about my daughter's feelings. I'll go talk to her. No, Ethan said firmly. I'll handle it. You've done enough for one night. The word stung, but I tried not to show it. Fine, be that way, but you're overreacting to something completely innocent. After Ethan left, I sat alone in our bedroom, still in my wedding lingerie, feeling the weight of the evening settling over me. My phone buzzed with a text message, and my heart jumped when I saw Leo's name. Thanks for the dance. You looked beautiful tonight. Sweet dreams, Mrs. Greaves. I should have deleted it immediately, should have blocked his number. Instead, I found myself reading it again, remembering the way he'd looked at me, the way he'd made me feel young and desirable and free. I heard voices downstairs, Ethan's low murmur, Lillian's sharp tones, Sophie's confused questions. My mother June had stayed to help with cleanup, and I could hear her defending me to anyone who would listen. Morwenna's always been friendly, June was saying. Some people just misinterpret kindness. That Leo boy was always too forward, even in college. But Lillian's response was cutting. Friendly is one thing, June. What I saw tonight was inappropriate, and if Ethan doesn't address it, it's only going to get worse. Address what? I demanded, appearing in the kitchen doorway. There's nothing to address. Lillian turned to face me, her grey eyes cold. Morwenna, I've held my tongue for months, but I won't stand by and watch you disrespect my son. What happened tonight was unacceptable. What happened tonight was a simple gesture blown out of proportion by people with dirty minds, I shot back. I'm sorry if my having male friends threatens you, but I'm not going to apologize for being social. Male friends? Oliver spoke up from where he was drying dishes. Morwenna, that guy was clearly hitting on you, and you were eating it up. I was not. Yes, you were, Ethan said quietly, entering the kitchen with Sophie in his arms. Our daughter looked small and frightened, her eyes red from crying. And what's worse is that you can't even admit it. I looked around the room at all the accusing faces. Lillian's disapproval, Oliver's disappointment, even my own mother's uncertainty. Only Sophie looked at me with unconditional love, and that made it worse somehow. "I think everyone needs to go home," I said finally. "It's been a long day, and we're all tired and emotional. Things will look different in the morning." "Will they?" Ethan asked, and something in his tone made my blood run cold. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife is more interested in defending her ex-boyfriend than in saving her marriage. "That's not true," I whispered, but even as I said it, I could feel Leo's text burning like a secret in my phone. One by one, the family members left. June kissed my cheek and whispered that everything would be fine, that men just needed time to get over their wounded pride. Lillian left without saying goodbye, her silence more damning than any words. Oliver hugged me briefly, but avoided my eyes. Finally, it was just Ethan, Sophie, and me. Our little family, fractured on what should have been the happiest night of our lives. "Daddy, why is everyone mad?" Sophie asked in a small voice. "Nobody's mad at you, sweetheart," Ethan assured her, carrying her upstairs. "Sometimes grown-ups just have disagreements. Everything's going to be okay." But as I watched them go, I wasn't sure anything would be okay ever again. And when my phone buzzed with another message from Leo, I found myself reading it eagerly instead of deleting it. "Hope I didn't cause too much trouble. You deserve better than a jealous husband. Call me if you need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time before finally putting my phone away. But I didn't delete it, and I didn't block his number. Later, when Ethan came back downstairs, he didn't come to our bedroom. I heard the couch springs creak in the living room and knew he was settling in for the night. Part of me wanted to go to him, to apologize and try to make things right. But a bigger part of me was angry that he was being so unreasonable about something so innocent. I lay awake for hours, replaying the evening's events. Maybe I had enjoyed Leo's attention a little too much. Maybe I had let the dance go on too long, let him get too close. But it wasn't like I'd cheated. It was just a dance, just a kiss on the hand. Ethan was being dramatic, letting his jealousy get the better of him. Wasn't he? Monday morning came too soon, bringing with it the harsh fluorescent lights of Patterson and Associates, the mid-sized accounting firm where I worked as an office manager. I'd called in sick on Friday for wedding preparations, so this was my first day back as a married woman. The weekend had been tense, with Ethan barely speaking to me and Sophie picking up on the atmosphere, becoming clingy and tearful. Well, look who's back," called Janet from reception, her voice carrying that fake sweetness that meant office gossip was about to flow. "How was the honeymoon period, Mrs. Greaves?" I forced a smile, setting my purse down at my desk. "Wonderful, thanks. Marriage suits me." But I could see the knowing looks being exchanged, the whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by. Someone had obviously been talking about the wedding reception. In a town like ours, news traveled fast, especially juicy news about public drama. My phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "How's married life? Still thinking about our dance?" I should have ignored it, should have deleted it and focused on work. Instead, I found myself typing back, "It's fine. Wedding was beautiful." His response came quickly. "You looked beautiful. That husband of yours doesn't know how lucky he is." A warm flutter ran through my chest. After a weekend of cold shoulders and accusatory looks, Leo's attention felt like sunshine after a storm. I glanced around the office to make sure no one was watching before responding. "Thank you. That's sweet. Want to grab lunch today? I'd love to hear how you're settling into married life." I hesitated. Meeting Leo for lunch felt like crossing a line, but what harm could there be in a friendly meal? We were adults, after all, and I needed someone to talk to who wouldn't judge me for every little thing. "Okay, somewhere quiet though. People love to gossip." "I know just the place. Chez Laurent at 12:30. Chez Laurent was the nicest French restaurant in town, intimate and expensive. Definitely not the kind of place for a casual lunch between friends. But before I could suggest somewhere more appropriate, my supervisor called me into his office for a meeting about quarterly reports. By lunchtime, I'd convinced myself that meeting Leo was perfectly innocent. I was a married woman having lunch with an old friend. If Ethan couldn't handle that, it was his problem, not mine. I told Janet I was running errands and would be back in an hour, then drove across town to the restaurant. Leo was already there, looking handsome in a navy suit that brought out his green eyes. He stood when I approached, kissing my cheek in greeting, a gesture that lasted just a moment too long. "You look incredible," he said, pulling out my chair. "Marriage agrees with you." "Thank you," I replied, settling into the plush seat and trying to ignore how romantic the atmosphere was. Soft jazz played in the background, candles flickered on white tablecloths, and the lighting was dim and intimate. "So," Leo said after we'd ordered wine, "just one glass," I told myself. "Tell me about the honeymoon. Where did you go?" "We didn't," I admitted, feeling embarrassed. "Ethan said we couldn't afford it right now with the house payments and Sophie's school expenses. We're planning to take a trip next year instead." Leo's eyebrows rose. "He didn't take you on a honeymoon? What kind of man doesn't take his new bride somewhere special?" "A practical one," I said, but Leo's words stung because I'd been disappointed too. Not everyone can be spontaneous and romantic all the time. "You deserve romance," Leo said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You deserve to be swept off your feet, not settled for." His fingers were warm against my skin, and I didn't pull away. "Leo, I'm serious, Morwenna. You were always meant for more than ordinary. Remember how we used to talk about traveling Europe together? Seeing the world?" I did remember. We'd spent hours planning imaginary trips, dreaming of adventures we'd never been able to afford. Then I'd gotten pregnant with Sophie, and dreams had given way to reality. "That was a long time ago," I said softly. "I have responsibilities now." "Do you ever miss it? The excitement, the possibility of something more?" I looked into his eyes and saw my own restlessness reflected there. "Sometimes," I whispered. We talked for 2 hours, the conversation flowing like wine. Leo told me about his job in marketing, his travels, the life he'd built for himself. I found myself sharing things I'd never told Ethan. My dreams of writing a novel, my secret wish to live somewhere exotic, my fear that I was becoming boring and ordinary. "You're not ordinary," Leo said firmly. "You're extraordinary, and if your husband can't see that, he's a fool." When he walked me back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. Leo made me feel interesting, desirable, alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. "Thank you for lunch," I said. "I needed this." "So did I," he replied, standing close enough that I could smell his cologne. "We should do this again soon." "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said weakly. "Why not? We're friends, aren't we? There's nothing wrong with friends having lunch." He was right, of course. There was nothing wrong with friendship. "Okay," I agreed, "but maybe somewhere less fancy next time." He smiled that devastating smile. "Anywhere you want, beautiful." Back at the office, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to Leo's words. "You deserve romance. You're extraordinary." When was the last time Ethan had made me feel that way? Janet appeared at my desk around 3 o'clock, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Long lunch today. Must have been some errands." "Just had to handle some banking stuff," I lied smoothly. "You know how those things can take forever." But I could see she didn't believe me, and I caught her whispering to the other secretaries when she thought I wasn't looking. By the time I left work, I was sure the whole office suspected something, even though there was nothing to suspect. At home, Ethan was helping Sophie with homework, while dinner simmered on the stove. The domestic scene should have warmed my heart, but instead it felt suffocating after my afternoon of excitement. "How was work?" Ethan asked without looking up from Sophie's math problems. "Fine," I said, hanging up my coat. Busy day. His tone was non-committal, still cold from our weekend fight. I wanted to tell him about my day, about the office gossip and Janet's nosiness, but I found myself editing out the lunch with Leo. It wasn't because I was hiding anything, I told myself. It was because Ethan was still being unreasonable about the wedding incident, and mentioning Leo would just start another fight. My phone buzzed with a text. "Thanks for a wonderful afternoon. You made my day brighter." I quickly deleted it before Ethan could see, but the warm feeling in my chest lingered. Someone appreciated me. Someone thought I was special. Was that so wrong? That night, as Ethan and I lay in bed with careful space between us, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if this was all there was. A suburban house, a predictable routine, a husband who took me for granted. Leo's words echoed in my mind. "You deserve more than ordinary." Maybe I did. 2 weeks passed in a strange, tense routine. Ethan remained politely distant, speaking to me only when necessary, and sleeping on the couch more nights than not. Sophie grew increasingly anxious, asking repeatedly if Mommy and Daddy were getting divorced, like her friend Emma's parents had. I met Leo for lunch 3 more times, always at different restaurants, always telling myself it was innocent friendship. But the conversations grew more intimate, the compliments more personal. He texted me daily now, little messages that made me smile and feel appreciated in a way I hadn't in months. "You're glowing lately," my sister Kira observed when she stopped by on Thursday evening. "Marriage must be treating you well." I glanced toward the living room where Ethan sat watching TV, pointedly ignoring our conversation. "It's wonderful," I lied. Kira followed my gaze, her expression troubled. "Everything okay with you two? You seem tense." "We're fine," I said quickly. "Just adjusting to married life, you know?" But Kira had always been perceptive, even when we were kids. "Morwenna, if something's wrong—" "Nothing's wrong," I interrupted. "Everyone's just being dramatic about nothing." That Friday, I decided to make an effort to fix things with Ethan. I left work early, stopped by the grocery store for ingredients for his favorite meal, and picked up a bottle of expensive wine. If he was going to be stubborn about the wedding incident, fine. I'd show him what a loving, devoted wife looked like. I was seasoning the steaks when my phone chimed with a text from Leo. "Missing your beautiful smile today. Hope your husband knows how lucky he is." The message made me flush with pleasure, and I was still smiling when Ethan walked into the kitchen. "What's got you so happy?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Just excited about dinner," I said, quickly putting my phone face down on the counter. "I made your favorite." Ethan glanced at the elaborate spread I'd prepared. Steaks, roasted vegetables, homemade bread, the works. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to cook for my husband?" I tried to keep my voice light, but something in his expression made me nervous. "I suppose not." He loosened his tie and sat at the kitchen island, watching me work. "How was your day?" "Good. Busy, the usual office drama." I turned back to the stove, hoping he couldn't see my face. "How about you?" "Interesting, actually." There was something in his tone that made me look up. "I had lunch at Murphy's Deli today. Janet from your office was there." My stomach dropped. "Oh?" "She mentioned you've been taking a lot of long lunches lately. Said you must have some serious banking issues to work out." I forced a laugh. "You know Janet. She loves to gossip about nothing." "Is that what it is? Nothing?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I could feel Ethan studying my face, looking for tells, for signs of deception. "Of course it's nothing," I said, but my voice came out too high, too defensive. "What else would it be?" "I don't know, Morwenna. You tell me." My phone buzzed again on the counter, and we both looked at it. The screen lit up with Leo's name and the beginning of a message. "Can't stop thinking about our conversation today." Ethan's face went very still. "Who's texting you?" "Nobody important," I said quickly. reaching for the phone, but Ethan was faster. "Leo March," he read, his voice deadly quiet. "Can't stop thinking about our conversation today. When did you have a conversation with Leo today, Morwenna?" "It's not what you think." "What I think," Ethan interrupted, his voice rising, "is that my wife has been lying to me. What I think is that you've been meeting with your ex-boyfriend behind my back." "We just had lunch," I protested, "as friends. There's nothing wrong with having lunch with a friend." "Friends?" Ethan's laugh was bitter. "Is that what you call a man who's clearly trying to break up your marriage?" "That's ridiculous. Leo's not trying to break up anything. He's just..." "Just what?" "Just telling you that you deserve better than your boring husband. Just reminding you of all the exciting things you're missing out on." I stared at him, shocked. "How do you..." "Because I know his type, Morwenna. And apparently, I'm learning your type too." The accusation hit like a slap. "My type? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're the kind of woman who gets married on Saturday and starts having secret lunches with her ex-boyfriend by Tuesday." "That's not fair," I said, tears starting to blur my vision. "You've been treating me like a criminal for weeks over nothing. One innocent dance, one little kiss on the hand, and suddenly I'm some kind of cheater." "One innocent dance?" Ethan's voice was incredulous. "Morwenna, do you hear yourself? You're minimizing and deflecting instead of taking responsibility for your actions." "What actions?" I demanded. "Having lunch with a friend, receiving text messages. Since when is that a crime?" "Since you started lying about it." Ethan slammed his hand on the counter, making me jump. "Since you started sneaking around and hiding things from your husband of 2 weeks." Sophie appeared in the doorway, her face pale and frightened. "Why are you yelling?" Ethan immediately softened his voice. "Sorry, sweetheart. Mommy and Daddy are just having a discussion. Why don't you go watch TV?" "I don't want to," Sophie said, tears starting to flow. "I want you to stop fighting." "We're not fighting," I said quickly, going to hug her. "Daddy's just upset about work stuff." But Sophie pushed me away. "You are fighting. You fight all the time now, and it's scary." She ran from the room, leaving Ethan and me staring at each other across the kitchen. "Look what you've done," I accused. "You've scared our daughter with your jealousy and paranoia." "What I've done?" Ethan's voice was dangerously quiet. "Morwenna, I found out my wife has been having secret meetings with her ex-boyfriend and lying to me about it, and you're blaming me for being upset." "They weren't secret meetings." "Then why didn't you tell me about them?" I opened my mouth to answer and realized I didn't have a good response. Why hadn't I told him? Because I knew he'd overreact, I told myself. Because he was already being unreasonable. "Because I knew you'd act exactly like this," I said finally. "I knew you'd turn something innocent into a federal case." "Innocent?" Ethan pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "Let me read you some of the messages I saw before you grabbed your phone. You deserve romance. Your husband doesn't know how lucky he is. You're meant for more than ordinary." Do those sound innocent to you? My face burned with embarrassment and anger. "You went through my phone?" It was sitting right there with his messages displayed. I didn't have to go through anything. Ethan set his phone down and looked at me with disappointment that cut deeper than anger. "The question is, why are you more upset about me seeing the messages than you are about receiving inappropriate messages from another man?" "Because they're not inappropriate." But even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. "Leo's just a friend who's trying to convince you to leave your husband," Ethan finished, and apparently succeeding, judging by how hard you're defending him. "I'm not defending him. I'm defending my right to have friends without being interrogated like a criminal. Friends don't send married women messages about deserving better than their husbands. Morwenna. Friends don't take married women to romantic restaurants and tell them they're settling for less than they deserve." "How do you know about the restaurants?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, and I saw Ethan's face change. "Lucky guess," he said slowly. "But thank you for confirming it. Romantic restaurants, huh? Still think this is just innocent friendship." I felt trapped, caught in a web of half-truths and justifications that were becoming harder to maintain. It's not what you're making it sound like. Then what is it, Morwenna? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my wife is having an emotional affair with her ex-boyfriend and lying to me about it. I'm not. I struggled to find words that would make him understand. I just needed someone to talk to, someone who doesn't judge me for every little thing. So you chose the man who's been trying to get you back since college? He's not trying to get me back, he's just what? Just being friendly, just showing interest, just making you feel special. Ethan's voice was tired now, defeated. Do you know what the worst part is, Morwenna? It's not that you're talking to him, it's that you can't see what he's doing. Or maybe you can see it, and you just don't care. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but his words hit too close to home. Had I been naive about Leo's intentions, or had I been willfully blind because I enjoyed the attention? I care, I said weakly. I care about our marriage. Do you? Because your actions suggest otherwise. Ethan picked up his keys from the counter. I'm going to my brother's place tonight. I need some space to think. Ethan, wait. But he was already walking toward the door. When you're ready to be honest with me about what's really going on, let me know. Until then, I can't do this. The front door closed behind him with a quiet click that sounded like the end of everything. 3 weeks passed in a blur of tense phone calls, failed attempts at reconciliation, and increasingly bold text messages from Leo. Ethan had moved in with Oliver temporarily, coming by only to see Sophie and collect more of his belongings. Each visit was cordial but cold, like we were polite strangers instead of husband and wife. I threw myself into justifying my actions to anyone who would listen. My mother June remained firmly in my corner, insisting that men just needed time to get over their wounded pride. But even she seemed less certain when I mentioned that Leo and I had met for coffee twice more since Ethan moved out. Maybe you should focus on your marriage instead of this friendship, she'd suggested gently, at least until things settle down. But I was tired of everyone telling me what to do, tired of being made to feel guilty for having a friend who appreciated me. Leo was the only person who didn't judge me, who didn't make me feel like I was walking on eggshells. You deserve so much better than this, he'd said during our last coffee date. A man who truly loves you wouldn't try to control who you can and can't see. His words echoed in my mind as I sat in my office on a grey Thursday morning, staring at another text from him. Thinking about you. Hope you're taking care of yourself. I was typing a response when my desk phone rang. Morwenna, this is David Chen from Peterson & Associates. I'm calling on behalf of my client, Ethan Greaves. My blood turned to ice. Peterson & Associates was a law firm. What can I do for you, Mr. Chen? I'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss some matters pertaining to your marriage. Would tomorrow at 2 o'clock work for you? What kind of matters? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. I think it would be better to discuss this in person. Will you be available? I wanted to refuse, to hang up and pretend this wasn't happening, but I knew that would only make things worse. Yes, I'll be there. That evening, I called my mother in a panic. Ethan's hired a lawyer, Mom. What am I supposed to do? Oh, honey. June's voice was sympathetic but worried. Maybe it's just for a legal separation, a cooling-off period. Or maybe he wants a divorce, I said, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. Over lunch with a friend. Can you believe this? Well, June hesitated. Morwenna, maybe you should consider whether this friendship is worth your marriage. Why should I have to choose? Why can't Ethan just trust me? But even as I said it, I could hear how hollow it sounded. The truth was, my feelings for Leo had grown more complicated over the past weeks. I looked forward to his messages, counted the hours until our coffee dates, found myself comparing his romantic attention to Ethan's practical approach to everything. The next afternoon, I sat in the plush conference room of Peterson & Associates, my hands shaking as David Chen spread documents across the mahogany table. Ethan sat across from me, looking like a stranger in his crisp suit and carefully neutral expression. Mrs. Greaves, Mr. Chen began, my client has asked me to present you with some information that's come to light regarding your recent activities. What activities? I demanded, but my voice came out smaller than I intended. Mr. Chen opened a manila folder and began laying out photographs. My stomach dropped as I recognized myself and Leo at various restaurants, laughing over wine, his hand covering mine across the table. Where did you get these? I whispered. That's not important, Mr. Chen replied. What's important is that they document a pattern of deceptive behavior that began immediately after your wedding. He produced printed text messages next, conversations between Leo and me that looked damning when stripped of context and laid out in black and white. I can't stop thinking about you, Mr. Chen read aloud. You deserve so much more than ordinary. Your husband doesn't appreciate what he has. These don't sound like messages between casual friends, Mrs. Greaves. You're taking them out of context, I protested, but my voice lacked conviction. Seeing the messages laid out like evidence in a criminal trial made me realize how inappropriate they really were. Are we? Mr. Chen continued reading. I miss the way things used to be between us. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together. You make me feel alive again. Would you like me to continue? I looked at Ethan, hoping to see some softness in his face, some sign that the man who'd loved me enough to marry me was still in there somewhere, but his expression remained carefully blank. Ethan, I said, my voice breaking, please, can we talk about this privately? We tried talking, he replied quietly. You chose to lie instead. I never lied. You lied by omission every single day, Ethan interrupted. Every time you came home from lunch with him and didn't mention it. Every time you got one of his texts and deleted it so I wouldn't see. Every time you told me I was being paranoid when you knew exactly what was happening. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. Mrs. Greaves, my client is prepared to file for divorce on grounds of adultery and emotional abandonment. However, he's willing to consider a separation agreement if you're prepared to make certain commitments. Adultery? I stood up so quickly my chair fell over. I never cheated on my husband. Emotional infidelity is still infidelity, Mr. Chen replied calmly. And these messages, combined with the photographic evidence of your secret meetings, paint a clear picture of an inappropriate relationship. They're just pictures of lunch, I said desperately. People are allowed to have lunch. People are allowed to have lunch, Ethan said quietly. Married people aren't allowed to have secret romantic lunches with ex-boyfriends while lying to their spouses about it. I sank back into my chair, the weight of the situation finally hitting me. What do you want from me? Complete cessation of contact with Leo March, Mr. Chen read from his notes. No phone calls, text messages, emails, or in-person meetings. Full transparency regarding your whereabouts and activities. Marriage counseling with a therapist of mutual choosing. And if I refuse? Then we proceed with the divorce filing. And given the evidence we've compiled, my client would likely receive full custody of Sophie, as well as the house and the majority of your shared assets. The room spun around me. You can't take Sophie away from me. I'm her mother. You're a mother who's been engaging in an extramarital emotional affair, Mr. Chen replied. Family court judges tend to take a dim view of that kind of behavior. I looked at Ethan again, searching for any sign of the man who'd once loved me enough to want to raise my daughter as his own. You'd really try to take Sophie from me? I don't want to take Sophie from anyone, Ethan said, and for the first time, his composure cracked slightly. I want her to have a stable home with two parents who respect their marriage vows. But if you can't commit to that, then yes, I'll do whatever it takes to protect her from this chaos. The threat hit me like a physical blow. Sophie was my world, my reason for everything. The thought of losing her, of becoming a weekend visitor in my own daughter's life was unbearable. This is blackmail, I whispered. This is consequences, Ethan corrected. Something you seem to have forgotten about. I stared down at the photographs scattered across the table, evidence of choices I'd convinced myself were harmless. But seeing them through Ethan's eyes, through a lawyer's eyes, I finally understood how far I'd strayed from the woman I'd promised to be when I said, "I do." "I need time to think," I said finally. "You have 24 hours, Mr. Chen replied. "After that, we file the papers." As I walked to my car on shaking legs, my phone buzzed with a text from Leo. "Haven't heard from you today. Everything okay, beautiful?" For the first time since this whole mess started, I didn't feel a flutter of excitement at his attention. Instead, I felt sick. Sick at what I'd risked, sick at what I'd lost, sick at the woman I'd become. I deleted the message without responding and drove home to an empty house, wondering if it was already too late to save my marriage. I spent the longest night of my life staring at the ceiling, trying to decide whether my marriage still had a chance. By morning, I signed the separation terms and started counseling, hoping Ethan and I could fix what I'd broken. But nothing changed. Ethan showed up, spoke politely, participated mechanically, and treated me like a stranger wearing his wife's face. "I gave up the night you defended Leo," he finally told me, and he meant it. 3 months later, we were in front of Judge Williams, finalizing our divorce. My cooperation didn't erase the months of emotional infidelity, the messages, the lies. The judge awarded Ethan the house, most of the assets, and primary custody of Sophie. I was granted supervised visits every other weekend. "Supervised?" I whispered, devastated. "For the sake of the child's stability," the judge replied. And that was that. When the decree was read, I apologized to Ethan one last time. He looked at me with nothing but sadness. "So am I," he said. Walking out of the building, I heard Sophie quietly ask him, "Am I going to live with Daddy now?" She looked at me with confusion instead of love, and I felt something inside me break. I had done that. I had made myself the villain in her story. Outside, Leo texted, pretending to offer support. I blocked him instantly. Only now did I understand. He'd never been a friend. He'd seen a vulnerable woman and pushed every boundary until my marriage collapsed, and I had let him. Driving home in the old Honda I'd been allowed to keep, I passed Grandview, the reception hall where 6 months ago I'd worn white and promised forever. I thought about the moment Leo kissed my hand, the moment I should have stepped back. If I had, everything might have been different. Kira called to ask how it went. "I lost everything," I told her. And I had Ethan, my home, my future, and worst of all, Sophie's trust. My mother barely spoke to me, my sister avoided me, my own daughter looked at me like I was a stranger. Sitting in the lot of my tiny studio apartment, I finally faced the truth. I had destroyed my own life, not because I'd fallen in love with someone else, but because I'd chased attention, ego, and escape instead of protecting my family. The woman I'd been on my wedding day, hopeful, trusting, excited, didn't exist anymore. In her place was someone who would spend years trying to earn back even a fraction of the respect she'd thrown away in one reckless moment. Whether redemption was possible, I didn't know. All I knew was that I was starting the rest of my life alone, with nothing left but consequences.